Welcome back to SportsLine, everybody. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday evening. As promised, we head to the phones right now and check in with our guy, Robbie Stanley from 102.5 of The Game. And, of course, longtime hockey writer, formerly of NHL.com. Robbie, you do that great morning show on 102.5 The Game. Were you aware that I do a morning show on WNSR, Nashville Sports Radio? Have I mentioned that at all?
I am very aware of it. You do a great job as well. So Nashville's in good hands right now with the two of us talking together. One of my favorite parts of the day is getting to be able to talk with you, and I'm glad we can do this again.
I appreciate it. You guys do a great show. You and Joe Rex wrote another friend to show. So, folks, give those guys a listen Monday through Friday in the morning, 6 to 10, I believe. Yeah, that's a little early for old Johnny Nashville, although, you know, early, late, you know, it's a fine line these days. All right, time to talk some Preds. 4-2 win over the Canucks last night. I was there. I was in the building. And first time seeing them play in person in a while. And, you know, there's a lot to get to with the Preds. But I tell you what, I know Forsberg had a couple of goals last night. But, Robbie, that was my first time seeing Tanner Giroux play in person. Wow, that kid is a stud, man. That guy is a classic. Big, strong, physical, two-way power forward. He's got a bright future with the Preds and in the NHL. This guy's a future All-Star, no question about it, and I think a future MVP candidate. What say you?
He is pretty darn good, and it's incredible to watch him play. And you brought up just the size that he brings to the table. You know, I think he's a really unique player in the sense that the combination of the size, the speed, and the skill level, there's not many guys like him. Like, you start looking around the league and you're like, okay, who can fight like Tanner Giroux? Not very many people. Who hits like Tanner Giroux? Not very many people. And then you've got the speed and the scoring ability to go along with it. He leads all rookies in the National Hockey League right now with 14 goals. So there's a lot to feel really good about for Tanner Giroux and his future. The most incredible part about it is he was undrafted. He scored 40 goals in junior hockey.
Whoa, wait a minute. Robbie, wait a minute. This guy was undrafted?
Undrafted, which is incredible to think about. You know, the term late bloomer gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
I think Tanner Giroux is probably a perfect example of that. And he has certainly made the most of his opportunity. So I agree with you, JB. I mean, there's a lot of really borderline incredible stories with this Predators team this year. Tanner Giroux is right near the top of the list. And I tell you what, with the way that he plays the game and just the tenacity that he brings, sky's the limit for that kid. He is about as unique of a player as the Predators have had in a long time.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Overall, Robbie, where are you at with the Preds? Are you surprised they've gotten off to such a good start? I mean, you know, great record here at the All-Star break, in great position seemingly in the Western Conference. I mean, going into the season, we really didn't know what to expect, right? Was this a rebuilding year? Was this a retooling year? And so far, man, they seem to be clicking on just about all cylinders right now and in a really good position at the All-Star break, seemingly.
I've been shocked with how well they've been able to play. JB, I'll be just straight up with you. I had them finishing 7th in the Central Division heading into this year. That's what I thought of the Predators heading into the year. And the reason for that was they just got so much younger. You know, Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansen, you know, we talked about them all summer long of not producing the last 2 years. Like, it just lined up to me where the inexperience I thought was going to catch up to them, and I didn't have faith that Duchene and Johansen were going to respond. Well, how they responded? Well, Matt Duchene is playing the best hockey he's ever played in his career, and Ryan Johansen looks like the Ryan Johansen that was here when the Predators signed him to an $8 million contract. So those two guys have been sensational. UC Saros has been unbelievable, and it's pretty incredible to watch him do what he does on a nightly basis. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear at this point they're not going to finish in 7th place in the Central Division. They're firmly a playoff team, and I ran the numbers the other day according to this website called moneypuck.com, and this was before they won last night. They had a 92.8% chance to get in the playoffs. That went up last night, I would assume. So you could pretty much bank on the Predators being a playoff team this year, which I thought at the high end maybe they could be on the bubble. They're pretty squarely in there right now, and I've been really surprised by how well they played. Not only how well they played, but how consistently well they played.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you more about Saros coming up in a second here. We're talking with Robbie Stanley from 102.5 The Game, and, of course, a longtime NHL writer with NHL.com. He has scaled his duties back a little bit, but still is plugged in with the Nashville Predators. You mentioned Johansen and Duchene. And you're right. For the most part, they have not lived up to the money they've been making. All of a sudden, this year it's clicked. Based on what you've seen, what do you think the reason for that is? Why have Duchesne and Johansen suddenly become the players we've all expected them to be?
Well, it's interesting, and I think the path there is a little bit different for both of those guys. I mean, as we know, both of them were left unprotected in the expansion draft, and that was basically the Predators saying, yeah, why don't you take on one of these contracts, Seattle? That'd be great. If you want to take on one of these contracts that makes $8 million a year. Obviously, Seattle didn't do that. I think we've seen in the last 2 years a little bit more from Johansen than we've seen from Duchesne. Obviously, Johansen's been incredibly productive in the playoffs. That really hasn't changed the last couple of years. He's been really good come playoff time, but there was just something missing in the regular season. Duchesne largely has just been, a shell of himself since he first got here, and that's obviously changed now at this point. But, if you listen to those guys talk, it just sounds like there was basically a come-to-Jesus meeting at the end of last year into the offseason. And Ryan Johansen and Matt Duchesne kind of laid out what they needed from John Hynes and his staff. John Hynes laid out his expectations for those two and how they can go about earning more responsibility. And for whatever reason, the meeting of the minds this past offseason seems to have clicked. Those two guys, I think, have totally bought in to the way that John Hynes wants them to play. And the way that John Hynes wants them to play turns out to be a really successful way for them to play. And they've been rewarded with more ice time because of that. So I think the journeys to get there have been a little bit different. But right now, those two, in the way that they're playing, their confidence is sky high. And, I know some Predators fans are maybe waiting for the shoe to drop and for them to revert back to their old ways. I just don't really see that happening this year based on the way those two guys have performed night in and night out.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And then you combine how they're playing with how Philip Forsberg is playing. He had 2 goals last night. And Roman Josi keeps rolling along. He became the franchise's all-time leader in assists, which, in my mind, Robbie, it feels like he still just got here. But, man, both these guys have been here a while. And, I mean, they're making their marks as 2 of the greatest players in this franchise's history.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think you can already make a pretty good case that Roman Josi is the best defenseman to ever walk through here. And, that's a bold statement. You got Shea Weber and Ryan Suter and PK Subban and, all these different guys that have come through here. But Roman Josi, I think, is the best of all of them. And, he won the Norris Trophy as the best defenseman in hockey 2 years ago. And I think he's having a better season this year. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win it again. I think he's right there in the conversation with it, but he has been awesome. He's got 44 points in 44 games this year. I mean, that's ridiculous to have a point per game as a defenseman when you're not really the one around the net scoring all the goals. So it's been incredible to watch him play the way that he is. And then Forsberg, I mean, he's on an absolute tear this year. 24 goals, 33 games. He's scoring basically every night for this team. And, he's picking a heck of a year to do it. It's a contract year for Philip Forsberg, so he's making himself a lot of money every night. But he has been fabulous. He's playing by far the best hockey we've ever seen him play. Now,
there's no way the Predators are going to let this guy walk. Is there, Robbie? There can't be.
It's pretty hard to believe that would be the case at this point. I think there was some hesitation on maybe both sides heading into the season of, Forsberg's been hurt a lot the last few years. And if you're the Predators, you want to see if he can stay healthy, if he can be more consistent, all these different things. And Forsberg, I think there was legitimate frustration from Forsberg from some of the moves that were made. Obviously, the Predators got rid of Victor Arvidsson. That was a very close friend of Forsberg. Ryan Ellis was traded. And there was no immediate NHL player that helps them coming back. Now, it turns out Ryan Ellis has played 4 games this year and now has been shut down for the season. So probably a pretty good move to get out from underneath that contract that pays him $6.25 million a year. But I just think everything that's happened since then with the way that he's played, and not only the way that he's played, but the way that the team has played as well. I think if you're Forsberg, maybe coming into this season, you were thinking to yourself, all right, well, what exactly is this team? If I sign a long-term contract, what am I signing up for? Am I signing up for a rebuild? Because I don't want any part of that. And now, with the way that they've played, it doesn't look like this team is close to a rebuild. It looks like it's being way closer to being a team that can compete in the Western Conference than it is to a rebuild. So I think both sides really like the fit. They really like the match. Now, here we are. You're a month and a half away from the trade deadline, and he's still not signed. So I know that makes Predators fans nervous, but if you're David Poyle, I think you got to find a way to get this done.
Well, you mentioned the trade deadline, and the Hall of Fame general manager David Poile always seems to make an effective move at the trade deadline. What kind of move would you expect from Poile this year at the trade deadline, or would you leave everything as is and go forward with what you got?
I think leaving everything as is may be the option that stands out the most when it comes to David Poile. If he is looking to make a move, there's one area in particular that I think could be intriguing, and that is, I think you feel great about the Granlund, Forsberg, Duchesne line. They're playing together, and they've been playing together for the most part all year long, and they've been incredibly productive, obviously. We've talked about Ryan Johansen and the way that he's played. It's kind of amazing he's been as productive as he has been because, Forsberg and Duchesne are on a different line. There's not really been that winger along with Johansen that's been a consistent scorer. So I'm interested to see as to whether or not David Poile looks around and says, all right, let's go find a winger that can play with Ryan Johansen and see if that can take that line to an even different level. So I think if that's a move you could look at, if it's not going to be a winger up there with Johansen, I would expect it to be some minor moves, maybe like an extra veteran defenseman that can slide in on your third pair, maybe a bottom six forward, bottom six center that can provide some depth there. But I don't expect the Predators to be major players at the deadline. I think a lot of this is, you like what you're seeing from the young guys, keep letting them play, give them more responsibility, and see what they can do come playoff time.
All right, well, let's say, for the sake of argument, that David Poile would be shopping for that winger to play with Ryan Johansen. Is there anybody out there that fits the bill right now?
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple of different options out there, and the one that Predators fans are kind of circling in on right now is Claude Giroux of the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, he's a big-ticket guy. He's been a really productive player for a long time. He can play at center. He has played on the wing as well. So he can do kind of either spot you wanted to do. I don't know if the Predators want to part with the assets it's going to take to bring in a guy like Claude Giroux, but it is kind of fascinating to think about. If you've got, your Forsberg, Duchesne, Granlund line, and you bring a guy like Claude Giroux to come in from Philadelphia to play with Ryan Johansen, all of a sudden that top six is looking pretty darn good heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, let's talk about UC Saros and, incredible season. Normally a slow starter, right? But he seemed to hit the ground running this year. Obviously, he's the established #1 goaltender with Pekka Rinne retired. And, of course, his jersey retirement ceremony is coming up and 2 days before the Stadium Series game against the Tampa Lightning. Saros is a deserving all-star. He's been absolutely fantastic this year. I thought he played a really solid game last night in the win over Vancouver. I know we've talked about this before, Robbie. I'm still not 100% convinced that this guy can carry a team all the way to a Stanley Cup. I look at his size or lack thereof, but man, this guy's been as good as any goaltender you'll find in the world so far this year.
Well, he has been, and it's really going on almost a full calendar year now that he has been. I mean, you think about basically from mid to late February from last year on, I mean, his numbers are ridiculous. And you mentioned there's always going to be a knock on Saros because he's not the biggest guy. And obviously, above the shoulder can be a vulnerability for him at times where, a guy like Pekka Rinne, he's just a giant out there. He takes up most of the net. Yeah. Saros doesn't have that luxury. So it's required him to be, I think, more efficient with his movement. It's required him to be more athletic. And, just talking to guys that know the goaltending position better than I do, like Chris Mason, who obviously used to play the position and now works on the TV side of things for the Preds.
Oh, yeah. Friend of the show, Chris Mason. We love Mace.
Yeah. Big time. Everybody loves Mace. I mean, they're all just blown away with his ability to make really difficult saves look routine. And what I mean by that, just how quick he's able to go side to side. Saros will make 1 or 2 saves every game where you're like, oh, okay, that was a pretty good save. And then you go back and watch the replay in slow-mo and you're like, how in the world did he get over there in time to get a skate on that puck or a pad on that puck? He does that on a routine basis. So, there's still, I think there's a difference between playing this well in the regular season and playing this well in the playoffs. And it still remains to be seen whether or not he can make that translation and make that jump. But I think if you're a Predators fan, you're feeling pretty good about UC Saros in goal right now.
No question about it. Robbie Stanley is our guest from 102.5 The Game. You can catch him every weekday morning, 6 to 10, along with Joe Rexrode for the Robbie and Rexrode show. I like how you got top billing there. Good job by you. Robbie, when you look at when you look at the Western Conference, who do you think? Obviously, the Predators seem to be a solid contender, as we said. Who else? Who would you say are the major contenders in the Western Conference?
Well, right now, Colorado is just on a different level. And, you know, they blew one last night to Arizona, a team which, honestly, they should never lose to and should be embarrassed that they lost that game. But before that, they had won 10 games in a row. They had just an epic matchup here a few weeks ago against the Predators, a wild game where Matt Duchene scores the game winner in overtime. But you're talking Nathan McKinnon. I know he's out right now, but when he's healthy, you've got McKinnon and Nazem Kadri and Cale Makar and Mikko Rantanen and Gabriel Landeskog, all these different players. Like, they started off a little slow this year, and they had some COVID issues, and it seems like they've gotten things figured out on that front. So Colorado, I think, is the biggest threat in the Western Conference. There's Vegas on the other side in the Pacific Division as well. They're still waiting to get Jack Eichel back. They made a big trade earlier this season for Jack Eichel. So when he comes back, and I feel like that'll be at some point this season, that's going to make them a pretty dangerous threat as well. I mean, the Central Division, Minnesota, Dallas, St. Louis, there's teams that are loaded in the Central. But if I had to identify two at the top in the West, I'd probably go Colorado and Vegas. That'll be your biggest names to watch if you're a Predators fan.
How about in the East? My New York Rangers having a pretty good season.
The Rangers are having a really good season, and goaltending has been, you know, the main storyline there. The East is flat out ridiculous. I mean, you've got teams like Florida and Tampa Bay and Carolina, New York, you know, Pittsburgh still doing Pittsburgh things and being really good every year. Washington, Boston, like, the East is absolutely loaded. And it's funny to look at it. I mean, the points percentages in the Western Conference, I think the Predators are in third place right now in points percentage in the West. They'd be in like 7th or 8th or 9th in the East in terms of their points percentage with how crazy good those teams are. So, you know, everybody's talking about the Torontos and the Floridas and the Carolinas of the world right now, and I understand it. And then there's Tampa that's just kind of sitting there right behind Florida for first place. And, you know, by the way, they've won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, looking like they could go for 3. So East is pretty loaded. Yeah, and speaking of the Lightning, of course, they'll be here later this month for the Stadium Series game against the Preds at Nissan Stadium. I've covered a couple of these in my day, Robbie. They're a lot of fun. They're great events. Oh, they are. If you've never been to an outdoor hockey game, it's totally a different experience than going to a game at Bridgestone Arena. I think both are great experiences in their own right, but, you know, I was down there in Dallas a couple of years ago for the Winter Classic at the Cotton Bowl, and it's just awesome. I mean, you got basically a college football type environment at a hockey game. There's 65,000, 70,000 people screaming and watching the sport take place and out of the elements. And, you know, it's Nashville, so Lord knows what the weather will be coming up on February 26th. It could be 15 degrees, and it could be 85 degrees. I have no clue what it's going to look like coming up on February 26th. But I can tell you this, if you've never been to an outdoor hockey game before, give it a shot. It's an experience you will not forget. Robbie, just want to switch gears a little bit. A couple more minutes with Robbie Stanley here on SportsLine. Obviously, you know, hockey's your game, but you also talk about and really follow the Tennessee Titans. Such a disappointing way to end their season, one and done in the playoffs as the 1 seed in the AFC. And I know Ryan Tannehill's getting a lot of heat, so is Todd Downing. Overall, just what are your thoughts on the Titans season and, you know, how it started and how it ended? Well, JB, it honestly kind of feels like, you know, a missed opportunity from the standpoint of, I feel like they missed their window to win. I really do. Yeah, I'm starting to think that myself, too. Yeah, I mean, like, so much, you know, they overcame so much in the regular season. And, you know, everybody's talked about the 91 players they used and the job that Mike Vrabel did. I still think Mike Vrabel's probably going to win Coach of the Year in the NFL. I think he deserves to win it. But you get to the playoffs, and really, once playoff time rolled around, everything lined up for you pretty well. You were getting healthier. Derrick Henry was back. Your offensive line was healthy. Your defense was playing at an elite level. And you had home field advantage. Like, everything lined up perfectly for the Titans come playoff time. And your quarterback went out there and screwed it up. I mean, that's basically how I read the situation. And, you know, sometimes windows to win, I think, have as much to do with other teams as they do your team. And just think about the quarterbacks in the AFC right now, JB. You've got Joe Burrow who's already in the Super Bowl in his second year, and he doesn't have an offensive line. Just think about how good he's going to be if they ever actually get him one. There's Josh Allen. By the way, there's some guy named Patrick Mahomes out there still as well. It just feels like with the quarterbacks in the AFC, and especially as some of this younger crop starts to get older, starts to get more experienced, it feels to me like this was the perfect storm for the Titans to win the Super Bowl, and they let it slip away. And I know they're going to have a good team coming back next year. Even if Ryan Tannehill's still the quarterback, they're probably going to win the AFC South. They're probably going to be right back there in the playoffs. But I don't know. To me, it just feels like they really missed their opportunity this year, and I'm not sure they're going to get another one quite like it.
All right, Robbie, there's always next year, right? Hey, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for doing this. Glad we had a chance to hook up on the show this evening. We got to get together soon and bend the old elbow. What do you say?
I say that sounds like a plan to me, JB. Love you, my friend.
I love you too, Robbie. Be well. There he goes, Robbie Stanley. You can catch him every weekday morning, 6 to 10 on 102.5 The Game. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. Your phone calls. Stay with us here on SportsLine.